Well, hello and welcome to Bingewatch, the podcast where we take a look at the hottest new TV and film releases on streaming television platforms. I'm Hannah Fernando, the group editor of Woman and Woman and Home magazine.
And I'm Ian McEwan, writer on TV and Satellite Week, TV Times and What's on TV magazines. And today we're looking at the new releases for the week starting Friday the 29th of September 2023, including tabloid sting documentary The Fake Sheikh on Prime Video, and Stephen Graham's spin-off restaurant drama series, Boiling Point, on iPlayer.
And we'll also be checking out Prime Video's The Boys spin-off Gen V and Apple TV comedy drama Flora Son. But first, Ian, what is in the news?
Coldplay singer Chris Martin will appear in the upcoming Disney Plus documentary series Camden, about how the North London neighbourhood has changed the face of popular music. What else is in the news, Hannah?
That sounds good. Well, the Disney Plus Christmas movie Dashing Through the Snow, I think I'm going to love this, will star rapper Chris Ludacris Bridges as a social worker who has turned his back on the festive season, not liking the latter part of that. No one should turn their back on it.
But you are a massive Ludacris fan, aren't you?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Well, you simply cannot fault us for variety this week, and I would say to a certain extent quality as well, because we've got some good stuff lined up for you, starting on Prime Video, arriving on Friday the 29th of September. It's a new sci-fi series called Gen V, and here's a clip.
I know there must be many thoughts going through your mind right now. Is this the right place for me? Do I belong here? But let me assure you that we see something in you. Something you may not even see yourself, even if you do have X-ray vision.
Congratulations, and welcome to Godolphin University.
Gen V, if you don't know, it's a spin-off from the superhero series The Boys, which we have reviewed before, which we really liked because it's amidst the plethora of superhero stuff on TV and film. It is hugely subversive contribution to the genre. This spin-off, well, in the world of The Boys, if you haven't watched The Boys, and it's really worth checking out, superheroes are celebrities and they're kind of like a brand, really. So they're all, they're advertising things and they're on telly and it's what everyone kind of aspires to be. But they're controlled by this rather shady corporation. The most famous superheroes are called the Seven. Okay, and one of them was called Homelander. Anyway, I won't go into all that. This is a spin-off, and as often happens in this genre, it's looking at the young people with superpowers as they hone their skills at this place called Godolphin University. The Boys wasn't afraid to be pretty violent and pretty dark and pretty weird, and this very much is the same. So we're following freshman Marie, played by Jazz Sinclair, and we're introduced to her in a pretty arresting scene. So she starts to menstruate for the first time, and then it literally turns into a bloodbath. I won't say any more than that. So she is sent to Godolphin, where all the people with, the most promising people with superpowers go to study. We're also going to meet Golden Boy, who's like the superhero equivalent of like the top jock at high school. He can control fire. Marie's roommate is very good. She's called Emma, played by Lizzie Broadway. And she's called Little Cricket because she can shrink herself, a bit like Ant-Man. She is involved in what I think must be the most bizarre sex scene ever seen on television. I'm not going to say any more than that, but it's just, it's not for the faint-hearted. So I really liked The Boys, as I say, because it's super subversive take on the whole superhero thing. Very dark, very funny, very original. This has got some more familiar elements in that it's the kind of freshman at uni thing and young people with powers, but of course, because it's from this stable, it's a pretty different take on it. If you like The Boys, you will definitely like this. If you haven't seen The Boys, you don't need to have seen The Boys to enjoy this, but if you haven't seen The Boys, I would recommend that you go back and watch that as well. Oh, and on a side note, Shelley Conn from Bridgerton plays the Dean of the University. I'm not quite sure if this is your bag, Hannah.
It's not, but just because I'm not a huge fan, as you well know, of sci-fi, but I couldn't help but draw some level of comparison between this and kind of the Harry Potter idea that, children with superpowers, kind of the best ones get taken away and put into a particular school, where those kind of actions get honed. But I mean, it's vastly different, but that kind of theory runs through. And I just, I don't know, there are weird scenes in it, aren't there? It sort of I feel a bit distracted by them. And I sort of almost, it doesn't do what it says on the tin to a degree. There are some sort of shock factors in there. So I guess that keeps an element of surprise when sci-fi is such a massive genre and knowing what else to do. But as you say, if you liked The Boys, you'll like this, but you don't need to see it first.
Over on Apple TV Plus, we have a film for you, arriving also on Friday the 29th of September. It's called Flora Son, and here's a clip.
Happy birthday.
What's that?
It's yours.
Don't want to play. Since when am I a guitarist?
I can't go on like this, living in a shoebox with a kid who hates me.
Can't wait for the day I don't have to be here.
Go on! Go back to your dad! I might learn the guitar myself.
That's just too funny. Takes years of practice, commitment.
Are you really going to talk to me about commitment?
I absolutely adored this. I think, firstly, I'm just going to say I absolutely love the Dublin accent. So that had me hooked immediately. But the story, of course, is the main thing. And it's such a nice story because it's relatable on so many levels. And it follows a single mum called Flora, played by Eve Hewson. And she has a teenage son. She had her son when she was very young. And he drives her to distraction. And me, just having a very young teenager, a new teenager, I can understand this. It's quite tricky at times. And he doesn't have any kind of real male influence in his life. Dad's not around. And he's really tricky. He's really difficult. But he's also in trouble with the law. And you can see her just at the end of her tether doing her very best, but feeling like she just can't do enough. And she doesn't have any money particularly. Everything is a massive struggle, and she just knows she needs to do something. And you've got these lovely sort of narratives of her talking to friends, and you see the real her. You kind of, on the outside, when you first meet her, you think she's a really hard nut to crack, but actually underneath it all, she's really quite a vulnerable soul. And she rescues this guitar out of a skip, I suppose it is, and kind of does it up and gives it to her son for his birthday. And he just looks at her like she's totally mad, and she throws it across the room and feels that she's failed yet again, because it's like you try really hard and buy someone a present you think they'll love, and then they don't, and it's just your heart sinks, doesn't it? And instead of kind of just chucking it and thinking that's not going to work, she thinks, no, I'm gonna learn to do something. She wants to do something with her life. And these days you don't have to see someone down the road, do you, or find someone local? You can do it all online, and that's where this sort of starts, and you really get to see her as a human. It's very, very funny in places. She has great comic timing, I think, and that sort of vulnerability and making you feel really sad, and the next minute she's having you in stitches. And she has this sort of long distance flirtation with this guitar teacher, and her son, meanwhile, is writing music too, and she goes in and she's desperate to be cool, because the age gap between them isn't huge. She is a young mum, and she wants to be cool, but of course, when you're a mum, you're never ever cool, are you? And he creates this music. It's absolutely brilliant. She helps him through relationships, so it's a really dysfunctional yet held together by extreme love between these two people. Neither are anything without each other, if that makes sense. So you just watch their journey, and I felt that it was very convincing, really authentic, very relatable to everybody and anybody. And I thought that, well, mum and son were the son Max is played by Oren Kinlan. I just thought they were absolutely brilliant in this. It really focused on them, and it was all about them. Thought it was great. What about you, Ian?
Yes, I enjoyed it, and as you say, I think the dysfunctional relationship between mum and son is really convincing. I mean, there's a lot of swearing, there's a lot of arguments, and of just living on an estate, without much money. It just seems that element of it is great. And she's brilliant, Eve Hewson, I think. And there's a really good scene where she goes round to drop off the son at the dad's house, and it's just it's really well done. I would say I'm not quite so keen once it gets she picks a guitar out of a skip, doesn't she, and it ends up being kind of a belated birthday present to the son, but he doesn't want it. And so she, in between glugging a lot of wine, signs up for online guitar lessons with Jeff, who is in America. And he's played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who has been in so many things. He was in Inception. He did his own series called Mr. Corman, which we reviewed a while back. And of course, that's all going on via Zoom, which I wasn't quite so keen on. We had a lot of those Zoom type things during lockdown, didn't we? But it's still good, and it's a sort of flirtatious relationship. In the first lesson, she asks him to take his shirt off, and he ends the call. So it gets a bit from that kind of really kitchen sink kind of convincing drama of the beginning. It goes a bit more fluffy, but that's fine. And yeah, I think there's a lot to recommend it. I really enjoyed it, I must say. We're going back to Prime Video for another new series. It arrived on Tuesday, the 26th of September. It's called The Fake Sheikh. And here's a clip.
Mazhar Mahmood, the king of the sting.
It didn't matter who you were.
The manager of the England football team.
The Duchess of York.
Former X Factor judge, Tulisa.
Newcastle football bosses.
What has happened?
The Fake Sheikh.
The Fake Sheikh.
You'd see other things that had happened to other people. Mate, that's never going to happen to me.
3 episodes of this one. I'm sure you'll remember this, Hannah. The tabloid journalist called Mazhar Mahmood, who was dubbed the Fake Sheikh because he used to dress up as a wealthy Arab and do undercover filming and recording of his meetings with celebrities, which would then be splashed across the tabloids. So the people that he tricked include Sarah Ferguson, Sven-Göran Eriksson, the former England football manager. It's a depressing story. It's very well done. It's very interesting, and it's got some of his totally unapologetic collaborators, and again, other tabloid journalists who seemed to think he was great. But really, it was just entrapment in the worst possible way. And the first case they look at is there was this glamour model called Emma Morgan, who was a Page 3 girl. So he disguised himself as the Sheikh and said that he was going to offer her a calendar shoot for lots of money, and he recruited a cocaine dealer in on the sting, and he basically said, if she wanted to get the contract, she had to get some cocaine from this dealer and give it to him. So it's just a total stitch up, a total setup. She would never have done that if he hadn't said, I want you to do this, and if you don't, you won't get the deal. Just awful stuff. And then quite often he gets people just saying unfortunate things. So he recorded Newcastle Football Club chairman Freddie Shepherd's, after he'd got him pissed, saying rude things about people in Newcastle. Same with Sarah Ferguson. It's just absolutely dreadful. I mean, he won an award for his journalism, but he ended up in prison, which I think is just as well. So, but a lot of people will remember him, but if you don't, it's a fascinating story, and it's sort of a reminder of the worst excesses of the sort of British gutter press that ended with phone hacking. Did you enjoy this, Hannah?
You feel quite strongly about that, don't you, Ian?
I do, yeah.
Yes, I did enjoy this. I have worked for the British gutter press, as you call it, myself. So I kind of I did find it very interesting, and I think it's documents the whole lot and take of it from it what you will. And as you say, he ended up behind bars, and I think that there's no way of righting that wrong, is there? What's done is done, and then that time must have been awful for those people that were involved in it. And but I do find that kind of thing fascinating, because you read about it, but unless you've kind of inside and understand it, you wouldn't truly understand it, if that makes sense. And I think this goes some way to explaining how it happened and why it happened and why it was so wrong.
We're going to finish over on BBC One and BBC iPlayer with a new drama series called Boiling Point, and here's a clip.
I need you to remember what we're doing here, what we've started.
New boy, you keep your ears open. Anyone needs anything, you get in there, yeah? Yes, sir. Right, check on table 8, 1 scout, 2 cod, 1 pork.
Keep pushing forward and let's do what we do. Yes, yes, come on.
Yummy.
Check on.
Yes, so you will remember, I think it was back in 2022 when this was on previously, but it was interesting or slightly different, because it was shot in one continuous 90-minute take. And if you're a big soap follower or lover, you'll know that that's quite a big deal. They occasionally do that, don't they? And things can go wrong, but it feels very effective, very convincing and believable, credible, all of that, because you are there with them. But really hard work and probably quite exhausting for the people taking part. So that's what they did with that. And where they left it was where the head chef, Andy Jones, played by Stephen Graham, he was the head chef at this very sort of upmarket London restaurant. He was having a heart attack. He was collapsing, and he was an alcoholic. He had some levels of drug addiction, and that's where it ended. And I think the assumption was that perhaps he didn't make it through, but I think that was kind of the end of it. But then what happened was the BBC gave Stephen a call and said, actually, can we do something more? And he, from what I've read, he said, well, he's dead. There's nothing we can do. Well, is he dead? No, turns out he's not. So although this isn't, because it's several parts as opposed to one continuous part, it's very difficult to just film in one continuous episode. They haven't done that this time, and I think it's probably for the best, because there's only so much you can do, isn't there, if you're in one room. But they rejoin 6 months later, and I think it's the first 11 minutes they do in continuous filming, so there's sort of a nod to that. But the former sous chef, Carly, played by Vanette Robinson, she's now leading that old team as the head chef. But it's at a new restaurant called Point North. And they've got this big group of investors in. She wants to impress. It's her first gig. But then something happens. Her mum's poorly. She's got to leave. She's forced to leave the kitchen. So her second in command, Freeman, played by Ray Panthanky, is in charge. And things start to unravel. And I love things like this, because so often we see like Hell's Kitchen, don't we? All those kind of Bake Off, all these sort of things where we see the pressure inside the kitchen. But this sort of feels very much like real time, but yet you also get to understand the characters. And because it isn't that continuous filming, this time around you do get to sort of see a bit more of their background, understand a bit more about them. Some of them perhaps don't have quite the qualifications they suggested they might have at time of employment. And then, of course, you've got the sort of the camera cutting to Andy, who really, he's become very angry because, of course, he had this heart attack. He's not in a good place. He hasn't got his job, and he's really embittered and cross and contemplating his bad fortune, very sweary, and quite sort of grey, dark life that he's leading. So it's kind of, you split between the two. So I felt that this one gave it a bit more depth, and I do like this sort of thing. I don't know how much longevity it's got. I suppose as long as you are invested in these people's lives and what goes on around them, then it could continue. But essentially it's that it's that sort of, you can almost feel the heat coming through the screen, if that makes sense, in that kitchen. It must be so hot, and the stress to get this sort of the perfect starter all going out at exactly the right time. And you know yourself, when you're a restaurant and you're paying really good money or whatever it is, you just want some good food, don't you? And you feel a bit cheated if you don't. And you really sense that pressure from these chefs, particularly given the scenario. So I thought it was good, actually. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I thought it was really good. Inevitably, it will be compared to The Bear on Disney Plus, which is also set in the kitchen of a posh restaurant. It feels really immersive, doesn't it? You really feel like you're in the kitchen. The dialogue is really naturalistic. As with The Bear, it feels as if it could just have been overheard. You know, it's very convincing. And I mean, as with The Bear, I found it very stressful to watch because, as you say, it's a big night in the restaurant. The head chef has to leave. The investors are in. Everything's going wrong. They've got this guy's turned up to work there who he isn't a properly trained chef, and they immediately ask him to make a hollandaise, and he starts Googling it. You know, so it's very stressful, but in a good way. Lots of great characters, and I think it was a good idea to spin it off into a series, and it certainly episode 1 worked really well. Okay, Hannah, fess up. What have you been binging on this week?
Well, I'm binging on what you've been binging on in recent weeks, because I have watched it a bit, but I haven't watched it enough, and I'm utterly addicted. I am literally binging, and I have to keep turning off every time the children come in. I just think it's the worst thing they could possibly see in their life. Well, not literally, but this is just such a sad indictment of society. Married at First Sight UK. Oh my goodness me. It is just insane, isn't it? The whole thing is insane. And I can't stop watching it. I just can't stop. So thank you, Ian.
It's good stuff. As well as that, I watched Solheim Cup, which is on BBC iPlayer. That was great victory for the Women's Europe golf team in that. And of course, I'll be glued to the Ryder Cup this weekend. But I also watched on Netflix. I'm a big fan of the Evil Dead movies by Sam Raimi. And there's a new one on Netflix called Evil Dead Rise. And it's jolly good. So we've just got time to look ahead to next week's offering. So what are we going to be talking about, Hannah?
Well, Tom Hiddleston's trickster god Loki returns in fantasy drama Loki on Disney Plus.
And a teenage time traveller takes on a serial killer in the Prime Video slasher comedy Totally Killer. So we look forward to those. And much, much more, but in the meantime...
Watching!